Dave the Diver is a Steam mega hit from Mint Rocket Games, having sold over 2 million copies. It's a game about scuba diving for fish and then serving that fish up in a sushi restaurant. Thousands of games get released on Steam every year, but Dave the Diver managed to stand out from the crowd. The game is brilliant in many ways, but one in particular is how the game is filled with game mechanics that allow the player to fulfill the core fantasy of the game. I'm here at Taiko Restaurant in Orange County. We're gonna go inside and see if we can talk to a sushi chef. How long have you been a sushi chef?
48 years.
48 years?
Yeah.
Wow. Do you play any video games?
Oh, yeah. Mahjong, also Tetris.
There's a video game that came out this year. It's called Dave the Diver. And during the day, you play as Dave, you put on some scuba gear, and you dive into the water and catch some fish. And then at night, in the game, you serve the sushi, you serve the fish as sushi to customers. Does that sound like something that would be fun?
Yeah, good. Yeah. Very fresh.
In today's video, we're going to talk about how Dave the Diver lets the player feel like they're diving underwater and catching fish. And then later in the video, we'll explore how the game makes the restaurant portion of the game feel authentic, including another chat with our sushi chef friend. Take a close look at this clip of the harpooning in Dave the Diver. How many design elements can you spot that contribute to making the harpooning action feel satisfying? As you're aiming the harpoon, there's both a precision UI element that clearly communicates the angle of your shot, as well as the minimum and maximum angle of your aim. As you aim up and down, the harpoon in Dave's hands also moves up and down, establishing a sense of control. As you are aiming the harpoon, the camera zooms in, building anticipation. As soon as you shoot the harpoon, Dave instantly jumps back into a lean back animation, giving the harpoon a sense of power behind the harpoon shot. Further emphasizing the power of the harpoon, the fish you hit is pushed back. In addition to giving a sense of power to the harpoon, it serves a gameplay purpose, ensuring that you'll need to reel in the fish regardless of the distance to the fish when you first fired it. Blood particles emanate both from the impact point with the fish as well as from the fish on the hook. Bubbles along the path of the harpoon give a subconscious visual cue that the harpoon rushed through the water at high speed. While Dave is struggling with the fish, he plays a rapid swim animation with his feet, which communicates to our brain that the fish is pulling against us. There's a light camera shake while the fish is hooked, further emphasizing that feeling of a struggle. As soon as the catch is complete, the camera eases back out, giving a sense of completion to the catch. There's a lot of detail and craftsmanship at work here, and we didn't even get into how Dave the Diver also makes great use of sound effects, slow motion, and more. Let's talk about the main character, Dave. In a lot of games, you play as a superhero or some other idealized avatar, but that's not the case in Dave the Diver. Two of Dave the Diver's developers, Jae-ho Hwang and Nolan King, were recently on the Game Maker's Notebook podcast. Listen to what they have to say about Dave.
There are certain games where you just want to be Superman, you want this huge power fantasy, right? And obviously Dave is not that kind of character from the get-go.
Dave the Diver took a different approach. They wanted Dave to be relatable.
And then there is the aspect of him being slightly rotund, I guess is a nice word. Him being like a little bit overweight, just like most of us are. The purpose of that was just for people to be identified. Of course, he's our protagonist and we can all understand him and he's just approachable, friendly uncle figure.
When you're designing a video game, every interaction the player has with the game is an opportunity to support the fantasy. Dave the Diver has mechanics to support the fantasy in every corner of the game. Even the user interface for the main menu is done with an in-game phone, just as you might imagine Dave might do. Game functions such as the quest log is a to-do list on Dave's phone. You buy new diving gear using the Weapon Shop app. Your equivalent of a Pokédex is an in-game app called Marinka. Even the settings menu for the game is the settings menu on the phone. Here's an approach a game designer might take when fully realizing the fantasy of a scuba diving underwater experience. Begin by brainstorming themes around the core fantasy you're trying to achieve. Make a list of activities, objects, emotions, characters, and so forth that support your core fantasy. During the brainstorming phase, you don't need to worry about how these activities are going to translate into gameplay. Once you have your list of ideas, you can identify which could contribute to being part of the game. For example, let's take a look at Dave the Diver's oxygen system. The oxygen system puts a limit on how long you can stay underwater. While you're underwater, your oxygen depletes slowly over time. If you run out of oxygen, your fishing expedition is over. Dave the Diver avoids traditional death mechanics and instead turns it into an interesting moment by prompting you to choose an item you want to keep before you have to discard the rest. This is an approachable way to make the player want to avoid running out of oxygen without being overly punitive. As you loot treasures, you have a chance of finding oxygen tanks, which extend your oxygen supply. It's an exciting moment. When you're fighting enemies, your oxygen depletes when they hit you, which adds interest to combat. The oxygen system is perfect for Dave the Diver because many of the mechanics match the player's expectations for what would be involved in a real scuba diving trip. A key benefit of designing the mechanics of your game to support the fantasy is that the reverse is also true. The mechanics support the fantasy, but the fantasy also helps to support the mechanics in return. In the case of the oxygen system, most players do not like dying in games. It's clearly a penalty created by the game designers. But when the fantasy supports the mechanics, players understand it better, and players accept the consequences more readily.
Since this is underwater and everyone knows that your air or oxygen goes down, if it's underwater, I think people understand, oh yeah, this can happen, so I have to deal with it.
Another underwater-themed system in Dave the Diver is a very elegant weight system. Every item you pick up has a weight in kilograms. This includes treasures you can find, resources you can bring back to the surface, and the fish you ultimately need to grab in order to make sushi. The oxygen system and the weight system combine to form a risk-reward situation. Risk-reward is a term that game designers use to describe a pattern in which the player can get increased reward by taking on extra risk. A key part of risk-reward systems is for the player to be in control of how much risk they take on. If they take on more risk, they get more reward. It's up to the player. In the case of Dave the Diver, as you grab more treasures, the increased weight can cause you to move more slowly. Moving more slowly increases your chance of running out of oxygen. These dynamics support the idea that you are an underwater diver with limited oxygen. Another clever way Dave the Diver accentuates the aesthetic of being underwater is the notable absence of a minimap.
Yeah, even I understand that desire for minimap sometimes when we're testing and playing through and there's some item I forgot where it was. Even now I want to go get it real quick and I wish there was a minimap, but as you play through, you know that there's a reason for that not being there. It just adds that slight extra exploration feeling. So
in this case, having no minimap combines with all the other mechanics to create a deeper sense of underwater exploration. Sometimes game design is about what you choose not to implement. Similar to the underwater game, the restaurant game also wants to be set up so that players really feel like they're running a restaurant. If you were to make a game about running a restaurant, you might start by brainstorming words and themes that are evocative of running a restaurant, and then pick the emotions and activities you really want to key in on. Is being a sushi chef hard?
Oh, very hard. In Japan, so hard.
Do you have to multitask?
Oh, yeah.
It's an important part of the job?
Yeah.
To make the restaurant stressful, we have customers who come and go. If they have to wait too long, you can start to see them get impatient. It takes Dave time to walk back and forth to serve the food, which makes it difficult to keep up.
We still had an automated sushi bar, but that didn't feel like I'm serving customers. So we added manual control, like pouring green tea, beer, and Dave go and directly serve a customer. So yeah, cool game. Yeah, that's how it started.
To create a sense of multitasking, the developers have created a number of mini-games. You have to pour tea, grate wasabi, serve fish, and clean up dishes. The player constantly has many demands vying for their attention. Each of these tasks satisfies the need for fantasy fulfillment. They all map directly to tasks one might do in a real sushi restaurant. Fantasy fulfillment is only one of the many reasons Dave the Diver is such a breakout success. It's also got fantastic pixel art, many progression and collection systems, and has incredibly interesting stories that are perfectly paced so they unfold to the player at a rate that keeps you engaged. I try to focus my game design spotlight videos on one topic at a time, and if you enjoyed this video, you might also enjoy my breakdown of how Cyberpunk 2077's Phantom Liberty expansion follows a very specific and powerful framework that can be used by any open world developers to make an expansion for a game. Happy game making.